us your name and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Jeff Johnson. I have been born and raised in the city of Cleveland. I have served in public service for over 30 years. 23 of those years I have been in elected office, 14 as a Cleveland City Councilman and 9 as a state senator. And so all my life it's been around public service. I learned that from my mother and father who were union members in a postal union, and got a good upbringing. So I grew up in the Collinwood and Glenville neighborhood, and went to Kent State University, got my bachelor's, went to Case Western, got my master's, and I got my law degree from Case, and I am an attorney. And so that's my background when it comes to preparation. Of course, I've also, during the time I served in the Senate and in the City Council, I fought for many issues that are community-based, fought for prison reform as a state senator. I fought for infant, to fight the problem of infant mortality. And in Cleveland, I dealt with police violence way before even the Black Lives Matter movement started back in the 80s, when the so-called squeegee murder of a police officer killing a Black male in a Glenville community was really my first time in 1984 that I started to grapple with that. I also led the fight to bring the sex crimes and child abuse unit to the Cleveland Police Department. That was successfully done. And I did that because prior to that, individual police district dealt with their own rape and sexual crimes, and they never communicated with each other. But once Gloria Pointer, 14-year-old girl, was snatched off the streets in Glenville, and Trina Middleton, who was from East Cleveland but was killed in Cleveland, when those two happened under my watch, that's when I fought for a much more comprehensive, smart way of dealing with sex crimes, and I also added child abuse. So that's one of my proud moments. Now we just need to get a lot of more detectives in there. So I fought for $15 an hour in 2017. It was unsuccessful. We tried to get on the ballot. I fought for us to have a proactive approach to get rid of poison lead. That ultimately eventually led to a law to be passed by the city after I left, but we kept the heat on, so to speak. And I have a history of social issues. I'm gonna pause there and just and drill down based on what issues you want to talk about.
Absolutely. And just keep in mind, I'm not sure if I shared with you, we have 9 questions that we ask everybody. You got 20 minutes to get through them. So some make it all the way through, some don't. But just be mindful.
Do I need to time it, or are you going?
No, I have a timer.
Okay,
I have a timer.
Down like 2 minutes or something.
Yeah, I'm gonna do like this and give you the 2-minute warning.
Real fast. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So my next question is what quantifiable work have you done inside the 11th Congressional District in the last 6 years as it relates to legislative policy?
Last 6 years. I just mentioned I left City Council in 2018 of January because I had ran for mayor in 2017. I had served 8 years in my second time at City Council. I did 5.5 years in City Council in the 80s before I became a state senator. But in the last 6 years, I pushed for the $15 an hour. That's the major issue I pushed for. The poison lead initiative I pushed for. I also advocated for us to reform the police department, particularly after the 100 bullets incident when 2 of our African-American citizens were killed. After Tamir Rice, I was a voice on the floor. I didn't pass legislation. If you know City Council, if you're not in with the inside leadership, you pretty much are ignored. In fact, ultimately the lead poisoning bill, 80% of what was eventually passed once I left was in my bill, but they would not hear it because it was my bill. Because I challenged City Hall to reform the police department. I asked for the police chief to resign because I felt that there wasn't enough accountability. And so I'm talking about also the safety director as well. So my service was really advocating for changing City Hall, access to more transparency, and fighting against what I call entrenched interests based on the status quo. And I was disappointed in how, in many ways, City Hall was functioning.
Okie dokie. Now, my next question is, in Washington, what committees would you like to be on, and how would they help the 11th Congressional District?
Economic development, definitely economics. I think the number one issue, other than getting through this pandemic and with its impact with African Americans, particularly given our health inequities, COVID is number one because of the clear and present danger, notwithstanding that vaccines are coming on. There's still a problem, but other than that, that's not really a committee I know, but except that healthcare, economics and healthcare and criminal justice, those would be the three ones that I want to be a part of. But quickly, number 4 and 5 would be housing and education. But let's deal with economics. It's about closing the wage gap. There's African Americans, Cleveland, for example, just Cleveland, and even in Akron, the high level of poverty in both those cities particularly, and in the inner ring suburbs as well of East Cleveland and in some parts of Cleveland Heights, we have this huge gap of prosperity and poverty. And I think you have to be able to come in with an urban agenda, not just for the big cities, but also for the smaller cities as well, to deal with investing in underutilized communities, being able to come in and support minority businesses with grants, not loans, but grants, helping to push us to a $15 an hour minimum wage in this state and ultimately in this country. I supported it to be in this particular bill that was taken out by the Senate. So economics is where I would push. I'm a big pro-labor person, for example. I really believe if we bring in more protections for the workers, that uplifts families across the country, as well as the 11th district. And I really believe that with what they've done to labor and try to undercut it, also undercuts the ability of folks to pull themselves out of poverty. I grew up with a mother and father who were labor people, and so I understand life when your union movement works. My standard of living, able to go off and get 3 college degrees. So I'm a big believer in that.
All righty. Our next question is, what is your current relationship with the Biden-Harris administration?
Well, I've never met, well, it was many, many years ago when I was state senator. I did meet Joe Biden when I was in the hallway, and I've met Kamala Harris a few times. My relationship is what I want it to be. And that is, as congressperson, I will come and be, I'm a full supporter of Biden-Harris. I was a supporter of Joe Biden before the South Carolina primaries. So if you know what that means, is that I was with him when it looked like he may not make it because of Iowa and New Hampshire, the results. So I also was a Biden delegate for him. I was elected among my peers here in Northeast Ohio to be one of his delegates. So I'm a big Biden supporter over the years, and I am committed. And I love Kamala Harris. My dream ticket is exactly what happened, Biden-Harris. And I think she is a phenomenal woman. And I'm going to Washington to stand with them. I want them to succeed. I don't like what's going on with some of the moderates in the Senate when it comes to them threatening what Biden wants to do. But at this point, I'm not in Congress, but when I'm there, they can count on me. And I'm gonna be a supporter of Nancy Pelosi as well, and trying to get in the leadership as well of her leadership team.
All righty. What are some examples of how you have worked across party lines to help with racial equity inside the 11th Congressional District in the past 6 years?
Well, one thing when you're a councilman in a city of Cleveland, there ain't many Republicans across the aisle. In fact, all of my colleagues were Democrats. And so when it comes to the last 6 years, when it comes to going across the aisle, and there was no one across the aisle, but dealing with individuals who disagree with you out in the community, dealing with stakeholders who may be Republicans, like business people and what have you. When it came to fighting for $15 an hour, I'm very good at working to be part of a coalition and helping to form the coalition. And also being able to sit in a room and agree to disagree if I can't move the other side. In this particular case, the $15 an hour ran across some very serious headwinds to a point where they blocked us from doing it. But I am not someone who is disagreeable just to be disagreeable. I do try to speak truth to power. When I stood and fought for example, the Q Arena deal, my problem with the Q Arena deal wasn't that it wasn't a wonderful project, it's that they wanted to continue to do the fees that were being paid was going continually to pay off debt there while we have so many in poverty. And as of course, when it came to the poison lead, I dealt with a lot of the community leaders who were Republicans, helping to persuade that we need to do this. But ultimately, it was another coalition led by the mayor and others. And I was part of a group that continued to push them, even though they won't give us credit. We started a movement, and I was part of that. And it wasn't 6 years ago, but let me just put it this way. When I was head of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, all of the state legislators, the Black legislators in 96 and 97, that's when you could see me crossing the aisle because the Republicans ran the Senate. They threatened Central State. They had threatened to close it down. The football team was also at risk. And I led the fight with the Black legislators to negotiate a deal where Central State stayed open. Football team was suspended for a number of years. It ultimately came back, but it was a real threat to closing. And that's one of my successes as a state senator, to be able to save that institution. But that was an example, and there was others when I was a state senator, when I was actually working around Republicans.
Alrighty, what are your plans for improvement to our current criminal justice system in the 11th Congressional District?
Well, let's talk about the criminal justice system as many facets. Let's talk about one of them, and that is police reform. I absolutely believe that how we define public safety has to change. I don't use the term defund the police, but I understand the concepts behind it. And I don't disagree with the concepts behind it. It's because it's about, I just don't like the term because I think it's too provocative and you spend too much time trying to explain it. I do believe that redistribution of how we fund our police services needs to be done. I'm a big supporter of how to use behavioral health as a way to deal with some of the real problems of the mental health and addiction. And you need to be able to have them part of a response team. Had we been able to do that, many of the people who are harmed or not properly dealt with when police show up, when there is mental breaks, we wouldn't have to be dealing with that. And so, like Miss Anderson, who passed away, who had some mental health issues, and the police didn't know how to handle her. That has to change. So I believe in changing how we spend the money. I also know that we need the training. We need to be able to deal with accountability. I supported the George Floyd Act that was recently passed. I would have voted for it. And that gets rid of chokeholds. It deals with getting rid of this whole issue of being protected from lawsuits. I believe you have to have police that are accountable. And I also believe in citizen review boards, ones that actually have accountability. I'm also an ex-offender myself. I'm recently, formerly incarcerated, and I got a second chance. And so criminal justice reform also has to include creating pathways, legitimate pathways, rather than warehousing people to be able to find their pathway, like I was able to find mine again, and get the chance to live a life that they dream of. You've got to be able to get rid of individuals, remove them from prison who are the low-level drug offenders. They don't need to be in prison. And so that over policing, that over prosecuting is an issue. And then when you come to dealing with our real violence in the streets, we have under policing because there's not creative ways of using the community as much as we should. Now, I've worked with our local people, of course, the icons, for example, that worked in the Glenville area. So I believe in that model, using folks who from the community to continue to work to help the community deal with this violence in the streets. And of course, bail reform is necessary too.
All righty. What are your plans for bridging the educational and digital divide gaps in the 11th Congressional District?
I think the federal government has to make a commitment to invest in areas where there is a significant digital gap. And in the greater Cleveland area and the greater Akron area, that exists. I live in Glenville. Glenville is one of the worst neighborhoods when it comes to access to the broadband, access to fiber optics and internet, cable. We were redlined years ago, and it still is occurring. Even as a homeowner in Glenville, I have a few options when it comes to internet services. It's ridiculous. So I'm experiencing it personally. So I believe the federal government has to come in with grants focused directly in these areas that are underutilized when it comes to access to the internet. I think it has to also be free and available to the community. And there's ways of doing that, investing in an infrastructure, technology infrastructure. If you want our people to pull themselves out of poverty, one of the ways to do it is to invest in the technological infrastructure of our society, because of what it is a driving force for jobs, for training, for understanding, for awareness. It takes away this feeling of isolation that will happen if that does not occur. So I believe that the local governments need to be supported by the federal government. Our state government is so problematic with the conservatives down there. So I believe in a direct federal-local relationship because of what's going on in Columbus. And I would be a big advocate of that. I really see the benefits of having tech-savvy neighborhoods that are non-traditional in the sense of where they used to be. Tremont should not be the only one with multiple choices of access to the internet.
All right, we're at your 2-minute warning.
How many more questions?
Two more questions.
Okay, 1 minute per question. Okay.
All right, what do you see as the biggest impediment to the wealth disparities in the 11th Congressional?
The biggest impediments?
Yes.
The lack of capital, the lack of enough support for the entrepreneurs that are in our community. My office is over here in the Euclid Green area in this Chandler office building, and it's full of African-American business people. I'm an attorney, so I have my office here as well. And the opportunity and what they want is low overhead and ability to be able to do whatever day job and then try to live out their dreams as insurance or even got some hairstylists here. So you've got to be able to strengthen the entrepreneurial spirit of Glenville.
All right.
Of the community. See, I'm Glenville, I think Glenville, of the district.
All right, and what are the priorities of the Biden-Harris administration for the 11th Congressional District?
Close the wage gap, the wage gap, to be supportive of public education. Our schools, we didn't talk a lot about the schools, but that is one of the infrastructural things that have to be invested in, and I know they're committed to that, but it really is about economics. I want to be able to have them also focus on public transportation, because that is really an economic development tool when you have proper public transportation. And of course, social justice. He's already talked about structural racism, systematic racism, and how that creates health inequities. So healthcare as well is something I support. For example, Obamacare with a public option. We have health inequities that we have to fight, hypertensions and behavioral health issues, obesity. So those are the menu of things that I'm aware that the Biden administration is interested in when it comes to districts like the 11th district. And I just got to make sure they know it.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Councilman, for participating. That was our last question, and we so appreciate that you did participate. God willing, we will